Welcome to Smash Avo Property. Today I'm speaking with Jacky Boy again. We've had a huge response to Jack Henderson's first podcast back in episode 9, so we wanted to catch up with him and see how he's coping in the current environment. Jack was also kind enough to give us some insight into what he's doing with his portfolio under the current circumstances, his view on the property sector moving forward, and if he thinks it's a good time to get into the market.
Mate, I think if you weren't thinking about buying investment property prior to this and now all of a sudden this has happened and you want to buy a property, it's probably not a good time to do it.
As always, seek your own professional financial, legal, taxation, and property investing advice for your current situation. Everything we talk about is just our opinion and general in nature and should never be considered as personal advice. Jack Henderson, welcome back to Smash Avo Property.
Mate, thank you very, very much for having me on again. Usually people, they have me on once, they block my number, delete my email address and never talk to me again. So it was a rude shock when I got a second invitation.
Mate, I can't get enough of you, especially those Budgie Smugglers that you're posting on LinkedIn every second day.
Mate, it's a bit of a brand building exercise.
I love it, mate. It transitioned from the white shorts to the budgie, so I wonder what's going to be next.
That's what everyone's thinking, mate. That's what everyone's thinking. They never know what to expect with me.
Nah, I love it, mate. And I think the reason for getting you back on is just, you're a bit of an influencer in my world, and I love to watch and see what you're up to, and love watching your journey and how you track and everything like that. And obviously, we're in a bit of an interesting time right now with what's going on with the virus and everything else like that. And I don't want to just have another virus conversation, but I want to chat to you as someone who's, sort of recently just started his buyer's agent journey. Well, not recently, but, giving it a red hot crack, and how you track and what you're doing and all that sort of stuff. But really, to get us started, I mean, how are you seeing the property market right now? What's going on out there? What's the sort of sentiment and the feel?
Yeah, good question, mate. And I'm getting that question a lot off many different people from many different walks of life. And in terms of the market as a whole, obviously, as you know, I don't look at the market as a whole. I always look at different markets and sub-markets within those markets. But I think there's a common denominator across all of the markets, and it's uncertainty. People don't know what's going to happen, and people don't know what's going to happen. A lot of people tend to just sit on the fence, regardless if they're buying a $500,000 property or they're spending $10 million. So the common thing across all these different markets is uncertainty. And, with uncertainty and less buyers in the market comes, lower prices and less demand. And so I guess as a whole, that there's definitely a lot of opportunity out there at the moment. If you're comparing, what prices are right now and what things are selling for to sort of 6 months ago or even 6 weeks ago, like it's changed dramatically. But if you're in the position to take advantage of what's happening right now, you're a very fortunate person, but you just have to be very, very calculated with what you're doing.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to see, because there's so many talks of how long this is going to play out for. Is it a 6-month thing? Is it a 3-month thing? Is it a 12-month thing? And then how does that correlate to the property market? And it's that whole sort of fear factor as well, is do we get in now? Do we not get in now? What do we wait for prices to go down? And, the media doesn't help with all the sort of stuff that they report and the way they report it. And yeah, it's just, you're right, mate. It's a bit of a confusing moment at the time, but I think, if you've got a grasp on your finances and in a strong position, you're comfortable in your job, it might be worth looking into taking advantage of the type of market that we're in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people who are looking at it, with the vision that we're going to wait until the market bottoms, or there's still going to be another 10% drop or whatever happens. Like if you're looking at the market like that and trying to take advantage of it like that, then you're already in the wrong mindset and you're already doing things wrong. Because if you're buying an asset of that much value and your only reason you're buying it is because you could think you can get it at a discount to what it was 6 months ago, it's probably not the smartest idea, because you're meant to be buying these things for 10 or 20 years, And if you're trying to save 5% right now and scrounge around for every last penny, rather than worrying about, I'm in the position to buy, let's just take advantage of the opportunities that come up. And that's the approach I'd be taking.
Yeah, for sure. And it's if you're waiting for 6 months or 12 months or however long you think this is going to play out for, and think that you're going to pick the bottom and buy right at the bottom, then you never know what's going to be on the market at the bottom. It might just be, the worst of the worst stock, or the people who, can't afford to hold on to their property. And so you just don't know what type of class of asset is going to be available then either. So if you can take action now, why not? And talking about that sort of process of buying at the moment, obviously inspections are pretty different in these sort of circumstances. I mean, as a buyer's agent, are you still doing inspections quite regularly, and what do they sort of look like in this situation?
Mate, it doesn't really change for me too much, to be honest, only because the majority of the stuff I do is private inspection anyway. I don't ever want to be there with the crowds of everyone on Thursdays and Saturdays. And the majority of the property that I'm buying for clients is off market or pre-market, and no one else is there when I'm there. So it doesn't really feel any different to me, to be completely honest with you. But, on the odd occasion when you do have to have a private appointment, what agents are trying to do is, if there's 5 people that want to get through that property, they generally have those private appointments back to back to back to back. That's strategic, as well as trying to make the most of their time. The strategic component of it is obviously, if you walk through a property privately, come out and see 4 other buyers waiting to go inside of that property, that creates that sense of urgency, and that creates a sense of competition. And obviously agents want to make the most of their time and not have to drive to a property 5 separate times in the day.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, a lot of buyers or potential buyers or buyers agent leverage that sort of information they get from a typical open home. They can see if it's busy, they can see who's looking through a contract or who's asking the agent what sorts of questions, and you can sort of relay that information back to the client and try and relate it to the demand that is for that type of property. And speaking of demand, and I know you alluded to, the Australian property market being broken up into, thousands of sub-markets before, but, are you currently seeing demand still for specific areas or specific markets within Australia?
Definitely, mate. Is the demand the same as it was 6 weeks ago? Absolutely not. Are you getting better prices right now? Absolutely. Yes, you are. How long that will last, nobody knows. But look, there are still things that are selling, within a week of being on the market. So there's definitely things still selling. There's definitely still demand there. There's just less demand. The thing to really take notice of in these times is the things that are selling and why those properties are selling, quicker than the other 10 or 20 properties sitting on the market in that same area that, represent the same value. So that's something that I really take notice of, because something that's selling in probably the most uncertain time that we've ever had in our lifetime, with everything that's going on, if they're selling now, imagine what they're going to sell for in really, really good time. So it's a good time to take notice of that, regardless if you're buying right now or not. It's why these properties are selling for, well above what the other properties are selling for that are similar to it.
Yeah,
Scarcity,
exactly.
scarcity in the other word.
Yeah. And I think that, that's why they hold their value so well as well, because the people who generally own these A grade types of properties are, been sitting on them for 20, 30 years, as you might say. And, they don't have any debt against the mortgage. They're sitting quite comfortably. And if they were to sell, if they're, older and downgrading or, trying to upgrade at some point in time, they've got time to sit on the property, wait for the market to sort of stabilize back out, and then they can take action from there, and that's where the value really retains itself, where, some of the lower class property or people that, in certain sectors that have lost their jobs and can't afford to hold on to their mortgage per se. But even in that circumstance, I mean, the government's plucking in plenty of stimulus to try and keep people afloat. So it's a bit of a hard one to say, and it does all come down to demand and supply. So are you seeing sort of supply shrinkage already? Are people taking their listings off the market? I mean, how's that sort of supply level looking at the moment?
Yeah. So for the markets that I work in, and I obviously track very, very closely, supply is 110% down. But like it sort of levels itself, because supply is down and buyers are down. But because the numbers have both come down together, there is still buyers around for the properties that are on the market. There's just not the urgency factor that was there 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago. But yeah, to answer short to your question, is supply is definitely down. And the thing to take notice of right now is people are only selling for a reason. So someone's only selling because they need to sell because of, financial distress, or they need to sell because they've bought something else, or they're opportunistic and they think if they're upgrading from $1 million property to a $2 million property and they've both been shaved or gotten haircuts by 10%, they're going to make up $100,000 in that transaction. So there's still people selling, but they're not just selling because they want to feel what the market has to offer. They're selling for a reason.
Yeah. I think you're spot on there, mate. And pushing forward into that sort of environment, do you think that we're going to continuously see the property market demand and supply come down? I mean, how do you think, well, your specific market's going to be looking sort of in the next 3 to 6 months?
Well, look, I work in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, a bit of inner west, a bit of lower North Shore and upper North Shore and Newcastle. Are there going to be all these distressed sellers and forced sales and massive price drops that everyone's predicting? I don't believe so, only for the simple reason that the government's doing everything they possibly can to make people not have to do that. Like, let's put your mortgage on hold, or let's give you the stimulus if you've lost your job. And there's so many different things out there that are trying to deter a market crash. So I don't think there's going to be the massive drops people think there's going to be. But look, time will tell what the market will look like in 6 to 9 months. I think this is going to be something that hangs around for quite a while, regardless if the virus is still rampant or not. The government's just not going to let everyone go back to living their normal life, once we've got it under control. I think things will slowly be opened back up, and there'll be so much caution around everything that we do. So it's going to be an interesting 6 to 9 months, but I don't think there's going to be the massive drops because people are not going to be selling because they're not going to have to because of all this stimulus. And if there's already low stock levels, there's a few buyers out there, so things will transact. And if they transact at a lower price point, because there will be so few transactions, we're not really going to get a really good gauge on what's happening.
Yeah, and it's almost not false reporting, but sort of underreporting, because if there's only if an area has gone from 20 transactions a week to 1 transaction a week, and it's at a significantly lower price point due to financial circumstances changing, then it's it's still going to get reported on, and we're going to see the data flow through eventually, but it's going to be almost inaccurate because it's not, those trading volumes aren't the same as what they were, and obviously it's different circumstances. So it's a bit of a hard one to say, and I think you're spot on with the time constraints there. I mean, even if we are looking at 6 months to a sort of slower recovery, there's always the wave 2 that people are concerned about. Once we come out of this sort of lockdown and everyone's like, yep, back to normal life again, will there be a phase 2, and will we have to go on a lockdown phase 2? And normally if we look at history and the flu pandemics that have come through on history, it's usually phase 2 that's the worst part of it. So I think as a country and as a community together, we need to really bunker down together, keep each other safe, and ride it out to the worst thing. And as you say, the government's keeping people employed as much as possible. They're trying to help keep people paying their rent and keeping their mortgages by implementing all these different policies and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be a long journey, but and speaking of that sort of long journey and however long this does take, do you see the property market sort of returning to how it was sort of tracking after that sort of V-shaped recovery?
I can't see why not, mate. Look, depending on how bad the job losses get and how bad buyer sentiment gets, which no one knows, but if it doesn't get any worse than this and it only gets better from here, I can't see why it would. Like, interest rates are at all-time lows. There's going to be a ridiculous amount of stimulus in the system. People are going to go from not buying or not doing anything from, for 6 to 9 months being locked in their houses to all of a sudden getting freedom and just going nuts, with regardless if that's buying property or going for dinner or whatever happens. It's just going to be a massive uplift in happiness and what people are doing. So that's going to have an on-flow effect to the property market for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And As a young gun that you are, and killing it as I would say, seeing your LinkedIn and stuff. I mean, you've sort of started your buyer's agent journey, and obviously this has had a big impact on your production and your workflow and your clients and all that sort of stuff. I mean, what are you sort of implementing to get through this period?
Mate, it's just about being realistic and having good perspective, right? Where majority of our loss in Australia to most people is just financial. And if that's all we've got to worry about, then it's not a very big deal, to be completely honest with you. And just having the right cash buffers in place, like we always talk about, but not many people actually would do because they never think something like this is going to happen. So, mate, it's pretty much smooth sailing for me. We just got to do 150% more work to get 10%, of the result, which is just the times we are in. But no, it's just having good perspective, realizing that it's not going to be forever, and smiling and going about my day like I usually would, mate.
That's all we can do, eh? Even if we got to work from home or things are different, we're all in it together, and so everyone's going through hardships and all that sort of stuff. So all we can do is help each other get past it.
Exactly. I'm not too worried about anything, mate. Like, it's bad, and some people are really feeling some financial pain, and there's people that have died. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a blip in time, and it's not that bad, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, spot on. And it's interesting, you talk about the cash buffers and, it not really being implemented for most. It's going to be interesting to see after all of this sort of passes how that sort of scenario all sort of plays out, and how people, is everyone going to be having offset accounts with 3 to 6 months worth of cash buffers ready for this type of stuff again? And then, how long before people get comfortable and start spending that money until it goes back into the economy? Like, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, and how people's financial and money management skills sort of develop over the next, 3 to 6 years. Now, given the typical Warren Buffett's quote, be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy, I think, you sort of have alluded to people getting in, or if they can at the moment. But do you think now is a good time for someone to be looking at an investment or even upgrading their family home?
Mate, I think if you weren't thinking about buying investment property prior to this, and now all of a sudden this has happened and you want to buy a property, it's probably not a good time to do it, because you're obviously only doing it because you think you can get something cheap, or make a quick dollar. But look, if you were looking for investment properties or thinking about doing it last year, and you were, regardless if this happened or not, you were going to get into the marketplace, and you're in a safe position, you've got stable income and all the rest of it, then yeah, sure. Why would you not buy a property that was, 6 weeks ago, 10 or 15% more expensive? So it's definitely a good time. And the same thing for a family home. If you're only upgrading family homes now because this has happened, then no, I don't think you should be doing it. But if you were always thinking about it, and you're in a comfortable position to do so, then sure, sell your property at a 10% loss to what it was worth 6 weeks ago, or 8 weeks ago, and buy something that's more expensive that you're also getting a bit of a haircut on. So I just don't think people should be jumping into a market when they never were going to do it anyway because of what's happening. Like, it's opportunistic buyers are usually only in it for short-term gains anyway, which is not the right reasons.
Yeah, spot on. And I think, as you mentioned before, it's a 10-year play minimum, 20, 30 or forever if you can, you play. And so if you're just getting into property now because your Uncle Barry's rung you and said the property market's going to crash by 30%, you better get in and, ride the wave back up, then maybe property isn't for you. And it's a long process, and there's planning and things to talk about. I mean, we do talk about having cash buffers and savings and all that sort of stuff. And so, it takes years for people to save enough money for a deposit to get into the property market. So you can't just start now, or, sell all your shares and decide that you're changing asset classes just because someone's told you the property market's going to take off again. But I think you're spot on with, if it's a pre-planned thing, or maybe even if it you weren't planning for it this year or next year, but you're in a good strong position, then maybe it's worth doing some research and thinking about it. But and what about?
I think though the thing is, if you were going to buy, and now all of a sudden you've been put off buying, now you're not going to buy because of the uncertainty, I think that's a wrong move. like there's a lot of people in that boat, I would say, that were going to buy, they're in the market. Now all of a sudden they're like, oh no, we're going to sit on the sideline now because we think it's going to drop. That's the wrong mindset and the wrong thing to be doing. Obviously, if your circumstance hasn't changed at all in terms of your career and your income and everything's quite stable, I still think you should be taking more caution and taking your time, but you still should be actively looking in the marketplace, because there's going to be things that come up that would not have come up previously that you can take full advantage of.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and it's all if you think the property market's going to crash significantly, then you're thinking too short term. You're thinking 6 months. You're thinking 9 months. You're thinking 12 months. Where, as we keep saying, the game is 10 years minimum, and so you got to think about how the property market or your property area might look in that sort of time frame, and really is a 10% loss, additional 10% loss going to be impacted or be a significant amount at that point in time. I mean, that's something you got to analyze and look at and understand as well. I think you're spot on there, Jack. And about, what about your portfolio? I mean, is there anything that you're planning to do in this sort of season? Are you refinancing? I mean, what does it look like for you?
Mate, so I actually just did a big refinance at the end of last year before I jumped into this business. So that won't be happening now for another 2 years. But yeah, so my portfolio will just be sitting pretty, mate. Funnily enough, though, you think blue chip areas don't get affected by this sort of thing in terms of the type of tenants you have. I've got a property in Maroubra that I've had the tenants contact my property manager and say, we've all, there's 3 people in it, and they've all either lost their job or had their hours cut. So, that's obviously going to have an effect on me in terms of the amount of rent they can pay. So, the portfolio is going to sit pretty, but regardless if you've got a $300,000 property or a $1.1 million property like that one is, it's people are getting affected across the board. And what that's made me think about is, you want to have your property tenanted for 100% of the time, because you don't want to have vacancy periods because they cost you money, but being a lot more I guess, going through your potential tenants with a fine-tooth comb and really taking into account how they can be affected in, things like this. Look, we're probably not going to see something like this for another 100 years, but it really makes you think, is it worth getting, premium rent, or maybe take a little clip off the rent and getting a tenant that's in a more stable job or stable career, I think. So that's something that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, for sure. That's and I love that you brought that up, and we're kind enough to share that with us, because it's it's probably a hardship that a lot of listeners are going through, or property investors are going through at the moment. There's lots of circumstance changes, and tenants are losing their jobs and all that sort of stuff. And I think it's critical to do that tenant process correctly and have the right property manager in place that's going to be presenting the right types of tenants to you. And it's all well and good to, as you say, get some premium rent and have some young guns in there that are all willing to do the same thing. But as it is a 1 in 100 year thing, so we're probably not going to go through it again, hopefully. But you never know what's going to happen. I mean, every year we've had something significant happen. Last 2017 was APRA changing the lending restrictions, and that brought the housing market down, and the GFC, and there's all these things in between, and anything can happen at any year. And so that tenant selection process is crucial to maintaining that cash flow in your portfolio. So thanks for sharing that with us, mate. But
100%, buddy.
And really, I mean, is there any final words for people going through some hardship at the moment?
Mate, if it's Australian listeners, then I think the biggest thing is just having perspective. Like, people's hardship at the moment is financial. And it just shows, like, you look at what the government's doing in terms of you lost your job, your business has been cut by 30 or more than 30%, you can't pay your rent. There's all of these things in place to make it as comfortable as possible for you. Anywhere in the world, and that's not happening. The Western world, sure, we're all very blessed, but anywhere else in the third world's not happening. So it's like, fuck. I think it's just, look at how things aren't really that bad, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah. I think
that's my might put on things. Sure, it's a shit time, especially someone like me who's growing a business, and we had such a great end to last year and start to this year. It's disheartening because things were going so well, but it's it's funny. I had a chat actually. This will put things into perspective. I had a chat with a friend the other day who has leukemia. He's got leukemia, and he beat that, or he thought he beat it. Went into remission, I think it's called. And then I chatted with him the other day. I said, "Oh, hey mate, how's everything going?" And he said, "Oh, I went back to the hospital the other day, and they found a tumor on the bottom of my skull and the top of my spinal cord."
Gosh.
And it's just like it just puts things into perspective. Like, fuck, everything people are worrying about. If they got told that news right now, do you really think they're worrying about losing their job or not being able to pay their rent, or their business not going as well as it once was? So yeah, it's just a thing to really think about. There's a lot of other shit going on in the world that is a lot worse.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's what this whole sort of working from home and having the family around and having a bit more time, sort of everyone's coming to the conclusion now what does really matter in life is, should we be spending more time with our family? Should we be spending more time with our kids and reading them books and putting them to bed and tucking them in? And it's all that sort of, what does life mean? What do we get out of life? I mean, when the economy's booming full steam ahead, it's all fun and games and everyone's making money, but the days go past pretty quickly too. So it's all about discovering what our lives actually mean and what we want out of them. And I think, for the most part, we should be thankful that we are in Australia, because there is so much stimulus and, so many things are coming through to help us sort of stabilize and get through this period. I mean, imagine if we're in a country that, didn't have the hospitals, or didn't have the accommodation, or didn't have the stimulus to sort of get us through this period. And, everyone was getting sick. I mean, at the start of this thing, early sort of Jan, all the doctors were saying, 65 to 70% of the population is going to get this. And if you look at the numbers in Australia and how it's been tracking, where we've significantly fallen off the cliff of daily numbers or daily cases. And so we should be thankful that we're in a country that has implemented and locked us down and done the right things. Some wouldn't say early enough, but if you look at the numbers, it seems to be doing a pretty good job. And sucks we're at home, we're not doing much, the economy's not churning, but at least we're healthy and safe and spending some time with our families.
110%, mate. That's exactly how I look at it.
Well, Jack, mate, it's always a pleasure chatting to you. I think keep doing what you're doing, mate. You provide a really good, in-depth, lot of content to a lot of people. You're definitely a little bit of a mentor of mine. I'm scared to say it, but there you go.
Mate, next time you do a podcast, jump into Budgie Smugglers. That's what a real mentor needs to see.
I think we'll do a video one for that, mate. How does that sound?
100%. Sounds like an absolute plan. No, I appreciate you having me on, mate, to share my thoughts.
I always love having a yarn with Jack. He's a cracking bloke, very insightful, and has an enormously grounded approach to investing. I want to know if you guys enjoy these repeat guest discussions, or if you'd like me to continue to get new, younger investors onto the show. You can let me know through LinkedIn or flick me an email at hi@jordandeyong.com. I'm always looking for more guests to come onto the show. If you're under 30 and have one or more investment properties, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, I would love to talk to you about it. Even if you're interested into getting into the property sector, let's have a chat. The main focus is to help other soon-to-be young investors with tips and tricks along the journey, learn from the mistakes that we have made, and ignite the fire to set themselves up financially for the rest of their lives. If you're interested in sharing a story, you can go to jordandeyong.com/podcast, where there's a podcast inquiry button at the top that will guide you through the next steps. If you want to see what else I'm up to, you can go to YouTube and type in Jordan de Jong, where you'll find the Smashed Ever Property podcast being hosted on YouTube and plenty of other content that I'm putting out consistently. If you're keen for more content like this, make sure you subscribe and please leave us a review with any feedback for future podcasts. And until next time, happy house hunting.